Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, June 13th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 83 days, the game against Michigan in 166 days. The preseason magazines are starting to come out, and so far, pretty much everyone seems to agree that Ohio State is a strong favorite to win the Big Ten, get back to the college football playoff, and is probably the biggest threat outside of maybe Alabama to win the national championship. But of course, every team has questions this time of year, and the Buckeyes are no exception. So today we're going to take a look at what maybe are the four biggest question marks around the field for this year's Ohio State team. My guest today is never a question mark. He's always an exclamation point. His name is Tony Gerdeman. He and I host the Buckeye Weekly podcast together. And Tony, I guess we probably need to specify right up front, like when we're talking about questions or concerns, Ohio State has rich people problems. Like this is like the wine fridge on my yacht runs a few degrees warm, like that kind of problems. But I guess, when you're competing with the Alabamas of the world, it can all end up mattering.
Yeah, Tom, thank you for saying it's nice for me to be here and all of that rigmarole. I appreciate that. But yeah, these are all relative problems where they're problems that the rest of the Big Ten would love to have, but problems that may show up when you are playing in January or on December 31st, trying to get to January. So they are problems that could, I don't want to say end things for the Buckeyes, but if you're going to look for a hole in the boat after you're sinking in the water, that might be where we talk about. Those are the areas we're going to talk about today, perhaps.
Yeah, and let's start with the linebackers. And, I think a month into the season, we may all be marveling at how different things look there with Jim Knowles in charge instead of Kerry Combs and Matt Barnes and Al Washington. But, for now, you've got a new scheme. We still haven't seen a fully healthy Cody Simon in quite a while. You feel fairly good about Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg. But it feels like behind those guys, like there's still some questions there.
Yeah, definitely. We saw Taraji Mitchell open the season as the starter at will last year, then eventually get that job taken from him by Steele Chambers, and then essentially disappear from the defense. This spring, he was at middle linebacker behind Tommy Eichenberg, but what happens to him with Cody Simon when Cody Simon comes back? And where is Cody Simon in all of this? Tommy Eichenberg started the season as the middle linebacker. I think that was because Cody Simon was hurt, and then Cody Simon took over, and then Cody Simon couldn't finish, so Tommy Eichenberg came back in and took over. But they split the entire time. And is there a situation this year where one guy is far superior or superior enough over the other to where they're just going to play one guy mainly, or is it going to be another situation where you just don't know from play to play who's going to be in there from series to series because they don't have like the alpha middle linebacker that they need or that hasn't really taken to the defense. Now, Jim Knowles has said very positive things about Tommy Eichenberg, but, as you said, it's a new defense. And frankly, it's a defense that worked in the Big 12, but got some yards and some points put up on it against the best offenses. Now, how many of the best offenses in the Big Ten, what are they going to be able to do against that same kind of defense? Who knows? But again, this isn't necessarily about the Big Ten. This is about after the Big Ten. And I think there are question marks. And who is the backup will behind Steele Chambers? And this is Steele Chambers is your best linebacker, perhaps. And he's been a linebacker for almost 12 months, Tom. Almost 12 months he's been a linebacker. So there's room to grow for him, definitely. But all of that room to grow means there's questions all along the way that he's going to have to answer. So I definitely think it's a concern. But again, this is also an area where Jim Knowles' defenses, their linebackers produce and they make plays. And so this we'll see exactly the talent level of this Ohio State linebacker group.
It's going to be really interesting to see Knowles because, you mentioned they gave him some yards, they gave him some points. They weren't perfect last year by any means at Oklahoma State. The games we're really talking about here are the late December, early January kind of games. December 31st and on is sort of the games we're really, by and large, talking about here. You're playing better competition in those than Oklahoma State played at any point last year. But Ohio State also has significantly better just talent overall. You want to look at the recruiting rankings, you want to look at the 40 times, you want to look at the, whatever strength, whatever metric you want to use. Just overall, the raw talent on the Ohio State defense is much better than what he was working with at Oklahoma State. So, how much does that level things up? A lot of this is not, this is a problem. It's more, here are the areas where there's maybe the most uncertainty on the team. You don't necessarily have a sure thing at linebacker. You mentioned all those names, and there's other guys in that mix. Chip Trainum, but he's doing what, he's 12 months behind Steel Chambers. He just started playing linebacker this spring. You've got Gabe Powers, you've got CJ Hicks. Those guys are both true freshmen. What are you going to get out of them? Who knows? Can Paula Teote stay healthy? What are you going to get out of Reed Carrico? I mean, there's sort of question marks with a lot of these guys. And, back to our punctuation, some of those are going to turn probably into periods. You might get a couple like Steel Chambers last year where he really does turn into an exclamation point. But right now, there are a lot of question marks there, and you got to see how that all shakes out. Next up, another spot where it feels like you look at the names and you go, I know all of these names, so they must be in good shape. It's like, well, Ronnie Hickman was great last year, but now he's been asked to take on a different role. He's at the adjuster or the deep safety spot, so he's, it's kind of a different responsibility. He should be good. It's just a little bit of a different skill set what they're looking for out of him there. You've got Josh Proctor. He's coming off a serious injury. Court Williams has had injury issues as well at that bandit or boundary spot. You got Tanner McAllister at the nickel spot. And, he obviously has a lot of experience with Knowles from Oklahoma State, but it's his first year in Columbus. So again, there aren't necessarily any red flags there to me, but I don't know if you can feel like any of those positions are like really totally sure things yet either.
Yeah, exactly. And you think back to heading into the off season last year, say like January of 2021, when you're thinking you're putting people in spots, like Ronnie Hickman at that point was almost a non-entity on defense, and it wasn't really thought of as a free safety because it didn't seem, the speed wasn't there or the range wasn't there. And then he shows up in the spring as the strong safety bullet, and then you really disregard his ability to be the free safety and be a field safety like he is right now. So I think there's questions about his ability to do that because we haven't seen it. Now, we've seen him make a ton of tackles last year, I think 99 tackles on the season thereabouts, and made some plays and was one of Ohio State's best defensive players. But now he's going to be doing something a little different. And the next time we see him there will be the first time we see him there, basically. And so there's definitely questions. Now, Jim Knowles has been effusive in his praise of Ronnie Hickman. And I guess if you are impressing defensively against this Ohio State offense in practice, let's not dismiss that at all. And then Josh Proctor, a guy who was brought in to be the deep safety and started there at the start of the season last year and got hurt. And I think playing strong safety kind of fits what he can do, but we haven't seen him do it yet in a full season. Haven't seen him really do a full season yet as well. Court Williams, same deal. Could be a playmaking strong safety type, but there are concerns. Jim Knowles spoke about the concerns with him covering receivers in the spring. Tanner McAllister, for all of the experience and all of the accolades from Jim Knowles, hasn't really received all conference accolades in his time at Oklahoma State. So there are definitely some interesting pieces. I think they'll all be a lot better with a strong defensive line. But also, again, this is where there are some possible exclamation points. Right now, I think everybody's in ellipses, maybe.
Yeah, and I tend to overuse those, or M dashes. Yeah, so there's you don't have any totally sure things there. It feels like it's like there's a lot of probablys and not a lot of certainlys. But again, this is much like the linebackers. You could be a month into the season and go, hey, remember back in June when those idiots were talking about this being a question mark for this team? That is entirely possible for both of those groups. And another place that's true is on the offensive line. They've got 4 more or less starting, I guess, offensive linemen back. Paris Johnson is switching sides of the line as well as position, so that's kind of, that's not a certainty. You're asking a true sophomore and Donovan Jackson to step up into the starting lineup as well. Matt Jones isn't technically a returning starter, but he kind of feels like more of a sure thing right now than the 2 guys I just mentioned. So, and this is probably one of the, even among the rich person problems, scale that we're talking about here, this is pretty far on one end because you've got a couple of former 5-star recruits. The early returns on both of them have been good. I think 125 other FBS teams would happily trade their offensive line situations with Ohio State right now. But, like the safeties, there are still ways you could see, there are ways this might not work at a national championship level.
Yeah, I think you also need to see improvement from Luke Whippler at center and DeJuan Jones at right tackle. The interior running game needs to improve. That starts up front with Luke Whippler, and it seemed to be better when Matt Jones was in there, so that will help. But Donovan Jackson is still a question mark. We all have expectations, high expectations for him. I think it's a default question mark rather than a true feeling per se, where it's just like, well, we don't know, so we're going to put this question mark here. But if we just put, like, this is one where I think could become an exclamation point pretty quickly. Paris Johnson, I'm not going to get too worried about the spring game. He's going to grow into that. But I go back to, you have to get these guys to be better than they were a year ago. DeJuan Jones had some issues. They saw some issues against Michigan, and just speed guys. The overall, like, you want him. He's a returning starter. He needs to be an all Big Ten player. He was the second team all Big Ten player, I think, by the media. He needs to be a no doubter type of guy this year. And if he doesn't make it, then it's a complete snub, that sort of thing, where maybe you just don't hear about him. And that's when you know that he's been very solid. So I think every single individual part could be an all Big Ten player. I truly believe that. They could all be first teamers. I don't expect that to happen because that's not how the voting generally turns out. But I wouldn't be surprised by any of these guys being a first team all Big Ten. But also, let's see it. And let's again, it's 3rd and 2 against Alabama, 3rd and 2 against Georgia. Like, what are you doing? What is this offensive line capable of? And honestly, 3rd and 2 against Michigan and Penn State, because there's still some programs in the Big Ten that you've got to prove that toughness to.
Yeah, and this is another one where it feels like if they can do that, 3rd and 2 was kind of one of the issues last year. Pass pro was pretty good throughout the course of the season. Kind of fell apart at Michigan, but a lot of stuff kind of fell apart at Michigan. The 3rd and 2 piece, if they can get that settled, it feels like they're in that Joe Moore best offensive line in the country award kind of categories in offensive line. It's just one more of those where I think a lot of Ohio State fans are saying that, yeah, this is great. Okay, show me. Let's see that on the field this fall. The last of the 4, something Ohio State fans have been asking to see more of for years, the tight end. You don't have a returning starter there, and while it seems like you probably have guys to fill all the different requirements of the role, a lot of them are kind of inexperienced. It seems like this is a spot you could just say, like, well, if you don't have one, just play 4 wide receivers, and they've got plenty of wide receivers, so that's not a problem. But then earlier this year, it sounded like Ryan Day didn't think they necessarily could just go without a tight end too much.
Yeah, Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson want that tight end in there to even up the numbers in the run game. So I don't expect to see much many 4 wide receiver sets from the Buckeyes. And so, yeah, there is a question mark because your starting tight end was playing linebacker the last time he was on the field. The last game he played in, he was playing linebacker in Cade Stover. Now, he had been playing tight end for 2 years, the 2 years prior. So there's definitely some experience there, and he picked it up really quickly. But what kind of, doesn't seem to be a Jeremy Rucker in the passing game. We don't know. We'll see. Very athletic guy, is strong, big, should be a solid blocker, but has had that role as a blocker and is used to it. So there's the experience there, but they like to do that 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, 1 back and 2 tight ends. And who is that second? And it can't just always be Mitch Rossi as like an H-back in the backfield type of thing. So Joe Royer, G. Scott need to step up, and they both have ability, but they're different kinds of tight ends. And will they flex out some, and they'll move the receivers around to utilize to put the defense in tougher situations with those 2 tight end sets. But yeah, I don't know what's the career catch number on the tight ends. I think it's like under 20, under 15, something like that coming into this season. So it's definitely a question mark, and I know people will disregard it because the tight end never gets the ball, but the tight end, don't look at it as how often they get the ball. Look at it as how often they're on the field, and that tells you their importance.
Yeah, you get a lot of snaps, and a lot of even when Jeremy Ruckert wasn't piling up huge receiving numbers, they were looking at him a lot in the red zone, and they were looking at Luke Farrell a lot in the red zone. You had 3 tight end touchdowns in that playoff semifinal win over Clemson a couple years ago. When they need to get there, that they are looking for the tight end at times in those really big spots. You can probably think off your top of your head of a big catch an Ohio State tight end didn't make that cost them a game about 17 years ago. I mean, that is a place where in the red zone, a lot of times that's the mismatch you're trying to isolate. So having someone that can fill that role. Can Cade Stover do the receiving part of the job? Can Joe Royer? Joe Royer feels like they're more, you hear more about him as a receiver than a blocker, but can he, handle both ends of that role? G. Scott, he's going to be, you got to feel good about him as a receiver. Can he handle the blocking piece? There's just sort of like a little bit of a question with all those guys, and you can sort of piece it together with one or the other. You have your receiving guy, you have your blocking guy, but that makes you a little more predictable as an offense. So again, these are not season-ending problems that we're talking about here, but it's just these guys are just sort of unproven on the whole. That's something that can be resolved relatively quickly earlier in the year if they get off to a good start. Which of these, Tony, to you is the biggest concern? I mean, maybe in terms of the level of concern or question you have with them, combined with the importance of that position to the team this fall. I mean, tight end is probably not a season ender if they don't have, a 100% proven tight end. But, which of these is your level of, the level of concern or question maybe mixed with the importance to the team? Which one do you think is the biggest concern to you?
Yeah, I think tight end, they'll have enough to work there, and they just may not be able to run as much 12 personnel. Honestly, I feel like the safeties are so important, and it is still pretty sizable question mark that's probably my answer. Now, the good thing about safety is they've got more answers than they've had in the past. Last year, they lost Josh Proctor and they had to change their entire defense. So this year, if one guy goes down, you have other options that can come in. And that's including Jansen Dunn, who we haven't seen in a year, coming off of an injury. Court Williams, Lathan Ransom, who has started. Cam Martinez, who has started. So there are a number of different guys that can come in. Now, will they play as well as the starters? Probably not, but I don't know that they would cause you to have to change the entire defense because they can't hold up. So I think, and even the guys who are starting, there's questions. There are questions there. So that's why I think they could be absolutely fantastic. But I also think that you're talking about three guys essentially working in unison and having to be that last line of defense. So I think that's my biggest concern right now is the safety position, because I expect the linebackers to almost they'll be aggressive enough at times that they'll be creating plays and creating issues, whereas the secondary, the guys in the safety a lot are reacting to stuff. So they'll have to hold up. They'll have more. They're going to be tested in so many different ways. So I think really that's for me the biggest concern right now, and could absolutely see them being an exclamation point this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything here that's this is a definite problem. It's more, raise an eyebrow and let's see, what is this going to look like in 3 months? But, it's either the safeties to me, just all the stuff you laid out. You can go back in seasons in Ohio State recent history, 2018, 2020, when the safety play is not great. You see a lot of players running for a long way with the football. With you get that. And then on the other side of the ball, you have seen when the offensive line doesn't work, it can really derail the offense. So those, I think, are the two highest stake ones where, you've seen bad linebacker teams, and if you have good safety play behind the bad linebacker play, it kind of works itself out, and it limits the damage to a certain degree. So yeah, I think it has to either be the offensive line or the safeties to me. And I don't know that either of them is. I don't know that either of them even raises to the level of problem or maybe slight concern at this point, but it's more uncertainty than anything else. I'll have to try and remember that when I'm typing out the title for this episode, which will be for the 4 biggest uncertainties. That's not very exciting. We'll have to workshop that before we get that posted, or maybe I'll just forget and title it something else entirely. So who's to say? Tony, thank you as always for joining me. Always a fun conversation with Tony. You can hear more conversations with Tony on the Buckeye Weekly podcast. He and I will be dropping a couple episodes of that this week. You will hear Mark Givler and Bill DeBank Green on Gives in the Bank, Kevin Noon on the Big Me Kickoff podcast, Alex Gleitman on Around the Oval. You can find all of those shows wherever you find this show. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of them. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review. You can subscribe, which will make sure you never miss an episode. We should have some fun episodes this week. We got a couple a couple more Ohio State football camps this week, and then we have a 7-on-7 camp, which we've never seen at Ohio State before. That should be a lot of fun. Hoping we can get the whole gang out there again together at the Woody Hayes for a nice fun day of watching some football and broiling in 96 or 97 degree temperatures. Should be a blast. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.